Hello everybody, it's Corey from Thought Soldiers. So I'm glad to be back home, back in my grids, back to being in my energy. I was definitely out of my energy for a few days when I traveled back to my old home in San Diego. And I'm creating this video because there are some shifts going on in the work that I've been called to do and to assist in my way of healing the masculine collective. And so we're gonna get some smudgy on while we talk about this, because yesterday was very distorted working through this. I actually had to call upon some help to get through the phase of distortions that occurred yesterday. And so I'm just going to bring some insight through on kind of what we're working through and what to expect if you're going through this. So right now, headaches, a lot of head stuff going on, really extreme headaches. This is all doing with crown expansion. And it feels like skull crushing is the way that it's occurring right now. As it feels like there's a rewrite and a rewire in our minds as we are expanding to hold more light and more higher frequency. But it does have to do with some past life stuff. There's a lot of ancestral karma clearing going on, at least for me. That has to do with a lot of the war and enslavement that's happened here on Earth and in other galaxies, and how that's played out in those narratives. So yesterday was a big, there was a big shift in moving through the war distortion of the masculine, which it tends to show up as an internal war. There was no external war going on. It was more of an internal fight that was happening. The ego, the distorted masculine programs that live within still, that are really deeply embedded, and the call for those to be released. Hence why you may be feeling a lot of body stuff going on right now, or at least I've been feeling a lot of body pain, a lot of shoulder pain, a lot of angel wing activations as the architects are rebuilding and restructuring the divine masculine template, and how it's been out of alignment with the trajectory of New Earth and those and the build out that's currently occurring. And so yesterday was really like, it was edgy. I just wanted to fight everyone. And so that call was just to like go really quiet and to not project. So the key to this is that when we are shifting through those programs and those narratives, whether it be at a collective level and individual level, is to be mindful that we are going through that, that essentially we can shift that density out without having to suffer. Suffering is definitely something we don't need to do now in New Earth. And the new ways of working with karma as the karma is coming up and we're calling to clear it. And that's something that I'm learning to do. This is something just through research. There's a lot of people that discuss this, that discuss karma in 5D and how to handle it, and how it best serves us in towards of the rewrites. And so being mindful that if you're moving through this distortion, for me, I've been having to take a break from all my relationships and be like, guys, I'm moving through stuff. I don't want to project this onto anyone. Because when we were feeling it inside, especially when it's really that deep, especially the war distortion is an inward struggle that ends up being projected out onto another person. And so how do we anchor in the highest love and the highest timeline while working through that distortion? And that's being quiet with self and ending the struggle internally. And that's doing it however you need to do it. If it's, breath work, meditation, yoga, dance, exercise. The narrative as it's been played out for eons is, okay, this distortion arises, internal conflict, take it out on another individual and keep that pain cycle accruing and keep that looping and looping and looping. And so part of this shift is that we go within as protectors of New Earth and protectors of humanity and protectors of everything around us. We go within and be mindful not to project that onto another individual, and then to communicate. Because a lot of the times the suppression in the masculine has led to a lack of communication, which has led to an outlash. It's led to acting out of character, snapping on an individual. So the idea is that this welling up of emotion needs to be released in some way, shape, or form, and then it needs to be handled in the highest trajectory in order to anchor in the highest timelines to clear that narrative. So how do we do that? We call forth love. We call forth love, the highest vibrational truth, and the guided action we need towards being able to shift through that narrative without keeping that cycle alive. Because when we keep, how we keep that loop alive amongst the collective is by handling it in an old way. We respond to the narrative with an old action. So this takes embodying a new level of action, which requires doing things completely differently, which means providing clarity, seeing things with love and compassion, honoring space, honoring time, and giving yourself the opportunity to feel without taking that out on another individual. And so that's what yesterday was all about for me. I was in traveling most of the day. Actually all day I was traveling on planes, and it was very difficult because I needed to release this in my own way, and I couldn't find a way to really shift it out while I was on a plane or while I was in travel, and a lot of the energy systems that I work with in the ways of clearing weren't working. And so this is where we reach out for help to people and go, hey, do you guys know how to find a teacher, find an energy worker, or just even do some research online, how to get over things like anger, how to handle anger healthily. Because it's the fundamental emotion that shows up in our spectrum, and as it's being called to release, what we do is we cope with it in a different manner. So we can look at it from one narrative where we're shifting out this program, we're shifting out this timeline, we're working through this karma, and we're releasing it. At a fundamental level, all it is there, at least for me, and this is the way I like to look at it, is there is a root emotion that's coming to the surface. What is the best way to cope with this in a healthy fashion? So it was a lot of anger, a lot of injustice, a lot of pain, internal pain, a lot of wounding coming to the surface. And so for me, the best way to deal with it was to silence, and not to internalize by going within, but by making sure I wasn't projecting that on another individual and I was letting that pass. And this is where we learn to let it be, let go and let God, people say. And that's just to honor the fact that we're moving through this wave. If this wave hits you, we're moving through this wave. It's not, as long as we don't act on the feeling or respond to the feeling with a distorted way of handling it. So I'm feeling anger, so I take it out on someone else, or I feel angry, so I take it out on myself. If I take it out on myself, that's another narrative that plays out that ends up keeping that alive. So coping with it in the best way that we possibly know how, with the highest vibrational truth and the highest vibrational timeline. And you can call that forward at any point in time. You can ask for your oversoul to come in, to connect with your oversoul, and then ask for the highest vibrational truth and the highest vibrational alignment of shifting out what you're going through, making sure you don't project it. And so that was a big thing. So what ended up triggering this was about 2 nights ago. I'm doing some divine masculine work right now with another individual that's holding some ceremonies, and basically I've been included in the group that is clearing out this stuff, and of course the masculine collective is going to be feeling it, as it's really important work in restructuring, and then how do we build that out effectively by anchoring in those templates and being in full embodiment of a true pure love divine masculine. And what ended up happening was I had a wonderful ceremony in San Diego for my brother, and we went out to a restaurant. And a majority of the staff at that restaurant were men. And I'm sitting there, and I started to get all these strange glares coming my way. And these kind of it energetically felt very strange. I knew that I was triggering something. I knew something was going on, and it took having to step out of the environment and reflect to notice what was going on. And this is what's very interesting about when this divine masculine stuff comes to the surface, is that your light, your purity, especially being in a masculine embodiment and calling forth these distortions to be removed, my frequency was igniting that within them to be able to come forth and come out. Now, it wasn't directly blatantly like no one came up and snapped at me, but I could energetically feel the discord once I landed in this restaurant. And the tough part was like, my initial reaction is, okay, I'm not welcomed here, get up and go. And it's not like anyone was treating me any differently, I just felt it. I felt that like my light and my frequency was sparking some, what I would call distorted alpha male, survival of the fittest, like it turned into an energetic showdown of whose place it was versus a unified experience where this is our world, we are guests here on this earth, and we're all going to love it unconditionally. It felt very much so of there was a thought of not belonging, not being good enough, all this self-worth stuff coming as there was this projection of my light igniting that within was causing them to send this energy to try to push me out. And so this is where I held space, and I stayed illuminated, I kept to myself. Part of the distortion is facing that, is coming up and meeting eye to eye with those scenarios and getting into combat, whether it be an energetic combat, a verbal combat, a physical combat, so on and so forth. And instead I chose to soften my core, and I chose to just be compassionate and kind of just sit there and stay to myself and let my light and my codes do what they needed to do until the dinner was wrapped up and we got out. And that's what kind of set off this this level of things for me that then happened yesterday, which was a strange embodiment all day of fighting off that, and this is interesting, fighting off that war stuff that was going on. And I recognized that when I was combating it, when I was meeting it with resistance, like, because it feels ugly and it feels disgusting when it comes to the surface. I don't like being in anger. There's a certain level of me that does, because there is a feeling of like power that comes from that anger when it comes to the surface. But since my heart is open and I'm soft and I really don't like projecting that onto people, it was hard because I was internalizing and I didn't know how to clear it properly. So a lot of that was just acceptance, and I tried to use softening music to really help open me up and to release it, versus keeping that narrative running by listening to media that was continually fueling it. So there is some, for me, when the anger and the war stuff comes to the surface, there are times that I can exacerbate or end up maximizing on that distortion by the media that I intake, because that is a way of releasing for me. So more aggressive music, things like that, was keeping that narrative alive. And so it offered me the opportunity to switch into a new pattern of handling that through, for me, listening to just like softer, calmer, compassionate music, and really trying to like essentially energetically dance this distortion out of me. And so that's what happened yesterday, and that's what was moving through the course of yesterday in my travels. Today now, there's another distortion coming to the surface, and this is a direct result, a direct tie-in to the war narrative, and that is the enslavement narrative. And so as a direct result of war and conflict, we've found a rise in enslavement. And so that's the distortion that's being moved through today. Well, how do we move through this distortion? Well, we recognize first off that in 5D Earth, and when we take our power back, which a lot of people in the collective and in the Starseed community is they're really empowering their light, embodying their light to the point where they're now able to speak their truth clearly, and they're really strengthening their resolve in order to take guided action towards bettering their lives. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. So with that, there's the recognition, and this distortion's just been carrying on a little bit last night and most of this morning, and so more to see what is revealed over the trajectory of today as I land in later times and continue to move through this. But right now, the things that I'm telling myself through this embodiment is, well, first off, I have free will. I've definitely taken my power back in a lot of circumstances, not 100%. I've taken my power back in a lot of circumstances, and I have free will to move around. Now, the enslavement for me is all a recognition of financial enslavement as well as enslavement to substances, things that are definitely programs and traumas that I hold within my body, that I've held within my body for a very long time, in this lifetime at least. And so the enslavement narrative is going to be, and especially the war narrative too, is going to come out personalized in your programming and what you're holding within that needs to be released in order to embody the new blueprints and the new templates. So today it's been heavily financial enslavement, as well as substance enslavement, enslavement to things that we necessarily, so like for me, the nicotine things coming to the surface heavily, and that's because, like, you know, I really don't want to be continually throwing substances in my system that are going to be keep me trapped, keep me enslaved by the dollar. Once again, the nicotine thing fuels the enslavement to the finances. So we start to see that there's an interconnectedness when it comes to the distortions that are creating, and if we can dissolve it at the root, we end up taking out that whole narrative. And so for me, those are the first big ones that are showing up today, and I know more are going to come to the surface throughout the day. So I just wanted to share those, especially about the financial enslavement. And this is where, you know, the financial enslavement is difficult because we're still in the midst of living in an economic construct where we trade time for money versus an even energetic exchange. And this is part of us clearing that narrative and stepping into the even energetic exchange of reciprocity personally. So then we offer that potentiality to another person, and then we also help to kind of raise that in the collective. So then there's an even exchange rate amongst the population. So at least here in the United States, and what I've seen is there's an extremely unfair, uneven rate of exchange when it comes down to goods and services. It's either extremely maximized, where you see these people that don't do a lot and make a lot of money, or you see people that bust their butts head and toe and receive nothing. And this really all depends on the karma that you chose to project down into with, in order to resolve that, find a solution, and then to break that pattern, and also to break that for the collective as well. And so with this, you know, there's a huge feeling of like the why can't I is coming to the surface, or I'm not good enough, or even knowing that you are good enough to make more than what you receive currently, but not wanting to because of the distortions you see amongst a certain percentage of the collective that has shown to us time and time again what that financial responsibility can do. And not wanting to play part in that. Well, this is one that's still clearing out. So once again, I'm not through it yet, but more to be revealed as this is going on. But what we can consciously choose to recognize is that first off, we really are, like, there are still enslavements going on. Like, I don't want to discount anyone's story, at least for me. And in my narrative and the things, and I've shifted out of, and the narratives that I've chosen to clear, there's a lot of enslavement and a lot of bondage that I've released myself from, that I consciously had to choose by taking my power back and taking my free will into accordance and saying I'm a sovereign being and I'm no longer going to subscribe to this. Now, there are still some enslavement systems, mainly enslavement of the mind and enslavement of the self and enslavement of the programmings that are keeping me held down. And why this is popping to the surface now is because it's time to let that go. Because I can see a glimpse of the best version of myself currently in the narrative that I'm operating in and the timeline I'm operating in, which is my primary ascension timeline. And because I can see into that being, I can see that discordant frequency that is keeping me. There's the programs and the structures that are still alive within me that are keeping me from hopping up into that version of myself. And so that's helping to clear. And once again, this all ties into the war scenario, the internal fight, instead of the acceptance and the being of a unified love aspect of self-love, and then letting that reflect out by embodying that compassion and love for another individual, thus unifying the collective. So that's what's going down as of the last 48 hours, 72 to 48 hours of shifting out these narratives, and to see what the next topic is coming up as we're shifting out more for the masculine collective. The recognition right now for if you are in a masculine embodiment is your light might piss off some other men. And just a reminder to tell yourself to use your discernment. If you sense this coming to the surface, if you feel things getting extremely heated by what I would call, I don't like labels, but let's label it as an unawakened masculine, or someone who's just not operating from a higher consciousness. Be mindful and use your discernment. If you feel energies building up and like your light is really affecting them in a negative way, make sure you land yourself in a safe zone, because there's a lot of unpredictable stuff going on right now. We're seeing it in the collective hologram. We're seeing it occur a lot right now. I know I don't land myself in scenarios to land myself in a situation where that could come to fruition, but you will energetically feel if something's off, and this is where we learn to sharpen our tool of discernment and recognize intuitively when it's time to go. And it's difficult in a masculine embodiment holding these codes and shining this light, because we can really piss off other men right now, and we know, we've seen the narrative play out, how other men handle that level of facing their wounds and facing their skeletons and facing their trauma. And this is where we hold space with love and compassion to show them that love and compassion from a distance. This is also to help, if you encounter anything like this where your frequency is really creating a discord with another individual and they start to act out, is to energetically remind them or even verbally remind them that you're not the enemy. We are not the enemy. We are just being ourselves, and sometimes that will affect another person in a quote-unquote negative way, and they don't know how to properly handle what's going on when that distortion comes to the surface, that trauma comes to the surface, whatever we want to label it as. And so, yeah, it's just a time to hold that loving space energetically, and to just remind our brothers and our sisters that we're not the enemy. You don't have to be in a masculine embodiment to be shifting through the masculine narrative, as we all hold the feminine and the masculine within. And all feminines have been directly impacted by the masculine distortion, plain and simple. The masculine distortion has created more distortion for the feminine, thus creating more distortion for the masculine, and keeping this karmic loop alive. And it is a deep, embedded cellular karmic pattern, as well as an ancestral karmic pattern, that we are working to remove right now. And there are forces out there that don't like us removing this. This is it's a deep level of work, and it is something that is extremely important as far as my mission is concerned, and as far as the collective mission, as all of these missions intertwine and interconnect in order towards raising and building out the new templates and the new structures for New Earth, part of the New Earth build out. But recognize that there is a percentage of the collective that does not want these distortions to be released, because they've kept a very large beast hungry and alive for a very long time. And this is where we really have to find our warrior and go, nope, I'm taking down this narrative. And it doesn't mean that we meet it with combat. So when we are taking down a narrative, we aren't energetically throwing ourselves into this to combat the combat, because that creates more combat. We embody through love and compassion to shine as much light on it, and to love it unconditionally, and let the love shift that out, and let pure source energy work through and shift that out. Let the energies provide what it needs towards removing that distortion, versus meeting it with a combatant frequency. And so I know that when I come out with this stuff, and I even start to read more about masculine embodiment and what the masculine is clearing, there are times where I step into warrior mode when I want to handle that from warrior mode. Well, we can handle it from the new love warrior mode, which is just protecting ourselves, protecting the ascension, protecting the rights of individuals, protecting love with love and understanding. And that is the soft strength that is being called forth in the masculine right now, as we are shifting out this narrative, not to meet it with a combatant frequency. We don't meet combat with combat, we meet combat with love, and we let love do the work that it needs to do. Because all of these pains and these distortions and these traumas all stem back down to childhood neglect, childhood abandonment, not receiving the love that we wanted at a certain point in our life, and thus, because of that, creating this block that keeps us from unifying, or will keep us engaged in a war cycle, whether it's internal war, external war, physical war, energetic war, spiritual war, verbal war. It's all war. And so we are working towards taking down that narrative through embodying love and compassion, and understanding, understanding, and being able to meet at our hearts and to let our hearts unite. So, anyways, that's all I've got for the last 72-hour forecast of the narratives I've been running through. Much love and respect to everybody out in the Webiverse. I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect from that. I'm really quick just going to sending out some love and some healing as we are moving through this. I hope everyone is doing well. Disconnect once again from that. Hope everyone's doing well. If you haven't, click subscribe. Got links in the description box. I look forward to continually shifting out this narrative and seeing what transpires as we start to build out more of these templates and build out more of the new masculine, which is just the true masculine, the pure masculine, and to see what comes to the surface. But definitely hold on. This is the ascension process has been a bumpy ride. This one is probably, I know it's going to make some waves through the collective, and we're going to start to see more exposure of things that we don't necessarily know are going on, especially in the spiritual community. We're going to start seeing it. You're going to also start to see, I haven't tapped into this too much, but a few people have, is to see how the masculine has actually been feeding off the feminine through spirituality and through different quote-unquote gurus and spiritual leaders. And so more of that will come to the surface, and I'm calling forth that the veil be removed, that we clearly see what's really happening behind the scenes in the orchestration into the Lightworker agenda, and to see clearly what's been going on, and how we've got these masculines that are in roles that are serving as guides and beings of awakening that are actually suppressing, and they don't know they are because of the things that are leeching off of them. And I've had to learn this myself the hard way, of the things that have shown up and leached off of me and in my field that I didn't know were working through me. So I'm calling forth that the veil be removed from that, that we see clearly exactly what's going on, so we can have a true rise of a true pure embodiment of the divine masculine, and a true pure embodiment of supporting the divine feminine in her rise to power, and to make sure that she doesn't have to have a distorted masculine standing by her side, but that she can have a true pure loving masculine that is standing by her side. And this doesn't mean relationship sense. This means, friend, keeper, a guardian. So she doesn't have to worry about the distortion or the beings coming through to siphon or to steal, but that she can walk sure, and we can walk sure knowing who is who on our path in that true embodiment. So anyways, much love and respect, guys. Love you all. With that, I'm going to break free and go rest and keep shifting. All right, guys, I will see you on the other side. Namaste.